Welcome to Sex with Rebecca, a show geared towards relationships and sexuality that'll help you enjoy your relationships more than you ever thought possible. When it comes to jobs, hobbies, what have you, we all invest in training and prep to bring on our A game. But when it comes to the most important job of our lives, our marriages, we leave it to chance. Small wonder the chances of a marriage making it are as good as a flip of a coin, 1 in 2. So today, we're going to be talking about all the ways to prep for the most important job of your life. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Kevin. Kevin is a therapist extraordinaire, and you do a lot of premarital counseling. So we're very excited to have you joining us tonight.
Really excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Welcome to Marital Boot Camp 101 with an expert in the area, Kevin Coupland, therapist extraordinaire, and someone who does a lot of premarital counseling to help couples set the right foundation. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much.
Really a pleasure to have you joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
But before we begin, what's that stat that you share with respect to the time and money people spend on a wedding versus the marriage itself?
Yeah. Well, I was doing some research on this and I discovered, would you realize that couples, the average couple spends about $30,000 for the marriage ceremony.
So that one day, it's 30 grand. Wow.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I don't think I spent that much, but I think it felt like close to that. However, we also discovered in looking at the statistics that the average couple spends about 2 hours per week in the year leading up to the ceremony in preparation for that one special day.
And what happens when they get married? Are they spending that kind of time and money on, solidifying their relationship?
Well, I think, Rebecca, we don't have any statistics to tell us yes or no how much people are spending on their marriage, but anecdotally, because of a lot of the clients that I see on a regular basis, I get the impression that they aren't spending nearly that amount of effort and resource in maintaining and developing their marriage.
I can certainly vouch for that. Sometimes when people say, if they need therapy, for instance, they don't want to spend $100, $150, and yet they'll go to dinner and spend that and have nothing to say to each other. They just sit quietly in front of each other.
That's true. I think couples probably spend more money and more effort, actually, if they adopt a dog, than what they would do in investing in their marriage.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the statistics keep startling us more and more.
Yes, it's very strange.
So as a premarital counselor, what are some of the things you feel that couples should think about?
Yeah, well, we do know that there are the big three, right? We got money, sex, and kids. And I think that those things are certainly important to talk about. But it comes down, really in the end, down to communication, doesn't it? And talking about those things ahead of time so that there are no surprises. Because it's really horrible when you have certain expectations and those expectations aren't met. And so I think a lot of couples that end up in therapy end up there because they have unrealized expectations, meaning they didn't actually discuss the big three and other things as well. And so they get surprised.
Yeah, and it's unrealized and unrealistic at times.
Unrealistic,
too.
yeah.
So we talked about the big three. What about stuff that feels less significant but can become an irritation over the long haul? So like how you squeeze the toothpaste versus how you squeeze your honey, or toilet paper going over the top or underneath as opposed to who's on the top and who's on the bottom in the bedroom. What's the deal there? Is it really about those little things?
The answer is both, perhaps for all of them, isn't it? But really, I think it's more about compromise. In the end, a good, healthy relationship is one about compromise. And really, does it really matter? Now, I'm sure that there are going to be many of our viewers out there that are going to say, yes, it does matter. The toilet paper goes over the top. Of course it does.
Depends on whether the male is putting it there or the female.
Exactly. But really, I think in the end, it is about compromise and about understanding that maybe your way is okay, maybe their way is okay too. And it's not a right and wrong thing. It's okay for you both to have opposing views, but still have different views.
And is it really that big of a deal? Now, some things,
really?
like the first three that you mentioned, they're a big deal. But for the other stuff, sometimes people just get stubborn and they want to be right as opposed to happy. So I'm glad we're going to be covering all kinds of territory.
To be right instead of being happy.
Now, how about those annoying habits that drive people crazy that may in fact get started off as "Oh, endearments, isn't that cute the way he chooses
Really
food?"
is chooses food,
What
yes.
happens? Like you start off being okay with it and almost
Yeah.
thinking that's cute, and then it doesn't feel cute anymore. What the heck happens there?
Well, they say before marriage, opposites attract, and then opposites attack after marriage. And
That's
I
well
think that
put.
that's really true, that sometimes things that you find endearing or different about another person, endearing, and later on, it can become very annoying because you look at it as a source of contention, or your difference is really bugging me because you're not like me. But imagine if you had two A-type personalities who were exactly the same. Imagine what that would be like too. So I tend to think that differences in a relationship actually can be a strength rather than a negative.
They can be complementary. I was
Very
reading
complementary, yeah.
an article that we survive based on heterogeneity, where, if, I don't know, aliens came and attacked the world, being different means at least one subset can live. So I think it's really important.
Kind of
and
the
we're
yin
design-
and the yang thing going on, right? Where we can
Absolutely.
give each other balance. And if you look at people's differences as being irritating, and you make that choice to say it's irritating, well then, yeah, of
It's gonna
course
get
it's going to
you.
be irritating. So as a little antidote to that, one daughter, she can't, my daughter, she can't stand irritating sounds and that crunching. And I said, listen, the more you let people know that it bothers you, probably the more it's going to happen. So you've just got to learn to let it go. Let it
Just
go.
let it go, because
Let it
otherwise
go.
there's that rebellion.
Yeah.
Great stuff, Kevin. Still ahead, prenups and negotiating knocks your socks off sex, since most people don't really like sex with socks on, even though that's better for female orgasms. So get a little closer and don't you dare go anywhere. Welcome back to Sex with Rebecca show, where we bring you expert advice on important matters to help your relationships be more intimate, exciting, and emotionally fulfilling. In this segment, we'll be taking you deeper into premarital boot camp with our special guest, Kevin Coupland, therapist extraordinaire and premarital counselor. Let's talk about prenups next, that
Okay.
dreaded topic.
Let's talk about money, huh?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I think that prenups are really letting your partner know what your hopes and your expectations are, right? Putting your cards out on the table and having that discussion. And if there isn't that discussion ahead of time, then you're likely going to end up having some surprises. So yes, prenups, I think, certainly can help with removing any surprises. However, on the flip side of it too, I think sometimes some people may look at it as if it's threatening or if it's bad luck. We're assuming that something may happen. It may or it may not.
Well, I say to people that talk like that, I
Yeah.
say it's sort of like buying insurance. Just because you have insurance doesn't mean you're going to drive your car into a concrete wall, but it's
Yep.
good to have the insurance. And
It is.
it's interesting, Dr. Sue Johnson, she says that you should have a negotiation at the beginning, but unfortunately, people negotiate when their marriage is over and they're going to a divorce court.
Yeah,
but with
the
the
wrong
prenup,
time.
you know ahead of time what this is going to look like.
Yep.
And I guess that's why more and more people are doing it nowadays.
Yeah, I think so, especially when you're talking about a lot of money. And it might seem, I think, for young couples that are starting out, that a prenup is not necessarily even necessary if you don't have any money and all you've got is love. But you just never know, because
Exactly.
I think of a recent example of a owner, a multi-billionaire who signed a prenup, and I think it's going to work out pretty well for his wife.
Really? And I think you're right, because it's not just about what you own now. Like both of my
Yes.
sons are professionals, and many of their friends,
Yeah.
they don't know what it's going to look like down the
don't know.
road.
You don't
So
know.
it protects both parties, and you never know. You might be reluctant,
Yeah.
but down the road, your partner may end up making a hell of a lot more money,
Yeah.
and you'll be glad that you had that.
I think another aspect of it could be also that when you have generally with older couples that get together, sometimes you have one partner who has a large amount of money and then the other partner who doesn't have very much money at all. So I've seen where that partner with less money wants to prove to the other person, I'm not here for your money, therefore let's sign the prenup so that it proves to you that I'm not a gold digger.
Which is fine as long
Yeah.
as you're married, that you want the other person to like you, not think of you as a gold digger. But in the event that the prenup does come to fruition, a lot of people have regret at that point because they've created a lifestyle. And particularly when kids are involved, if you get screwed, you've got this little place and this other person has a beautiful place. Your kids don't want to come to your place. It's not even about money or gold digging. It's about being a bit more realistic. I'm so glad we tackled that because a lot of people are afraid of talking about that.
Yeah, it's really important to get it all out in the open, isn't it?
Yeah, so people, this is a great segment to talk to your fiance about.
Yeah.
So what are some of the how-tos? How do you broach the subject?
It's not always easy, is it, to have that conversation?
I concur.
So I would say I'm going to advocate for pre-marriage coaching. Certainly if you can have that conversation with a therapist in a pre-coaching and pre-marriage coaching environment, that's a good idea. Or it can be certainly as less combative as possible. So you don't want to have this kind of discussion when you're feeling upset or angry because you're probably not going to be very level-headed about it, right? But maybe, you know, you go out for dinner and you say, let's talk about some of these things. Let's talk about what your expectations are. Let's talk about what it was like for you when you were growing up. Because oftentimes I find when people their concepts and their ideas about how things should be is often formulated by how their family operated.
Their family of origin. And I think another great way is also if they're doing, for instance, premarital counseling with you, this is a subject that you can bring up. So the onus is off the other individual. So it's a really great idea because, you know, it's coming from a professional who can talk about the merits of having something like that. So always great to go for that premarital counseling. Now let's move onto something else that can also be a bone of contention. Even when we're deeply in love with a partner and desire them more than anyone else, attractive people will still catch our eye. What's the best way to handle that situation? Like some people say a little glance is okay. Some people say a leer is awful. And other people, even that little glance, it can be
it can be very triggering, can't it?
It can be, yes.
Yes, especially if you have a partner that has gone through some trauma, some loss in the past or felt some abuse in the past. They can be trust issues, certainly feeling very threatened by even their partner even looking or walking by Victoria's Secrets, you know, and they have to go like this.
Oh, come on, who doesn't feel threatened? I feel threatened by walking by Victoria's Secret by myself. No, but you're right. The threat level is there. So one of the things that I point out to my clients is, okay, I'll take myself as an example. If there's a hot babe walking by, that's when I'm going to do one of these to see if my husband has noticed her. If I've noticed her, why wouldn't he notice her? I don't do that all the time. So I have to allow the space to say, look, I noticed her, and we're sort of programmed to look at pretty things, the Ferrari that pulls up next to you, whatever. So we should give each other that space to not get upset. And if it is going to be a bone of contention, I think you're right. It needs to be something you mention ahead of time that, look, such and such can be triggering for me.
And be realistic. I like what you pointed out there. Be realistic that your partner isn't always going to get it perfect. And as long as they're not leering or they're not making, you know, steps afterwards, after they see something that they like, perhaps that's the line. But you have to create, I think each couple does have to create their own boundaries of what's acceptable behavior and what's not.
And wide berth around Victoria's Secret.
Victoria's Secret, yes.
So I guess it's important to establish some ground rules ahead of time.
Ground rules,
How about some rules around how we do things? So, you know, we're talking about how we deal with friends, relatives, holidays, social planning, interactions, all those things, you know. What's the best way to navigate through that? Because, you know, lots of times over holidays, people just, they get vicious because you have a different way of doing things. Your partner may have a different way of doing things. What is a safe way to navigate through that so we don't kill each other?
Oh, really good question. And I think it's
is there a good answer?
I think that there is, but it's going to be, I'll put an asterisk beside it and say it depends. And it depends on the couple, doesn't it? Because every couple is different. So we are making, of course, some generalizations today to say this is how to do it. But for each couple, the rules are going to adapt to their situation just a little bit. But again, having the conversations ahead of time and also flexibility. If I come to your house for Thanksgiving this year, we worked out, my wife and I work out, we go one place for Thanksgiving, then we go someplace different for Christmas. So we work it out. Compromise. Compromise lets your partner know that you value what's important to them. And I think that's really important in a loving marriage, that you go out of your own comfort zone for your partner, but then also that's reciprocated coming back as well too.
And speaking of important, a lot of times these things aren't all that important, but we make them that way.
Yeah,
so I
they are
think the
symbolic,
conversations
aren't
are important, but most of these issues aren't that important outside the big three, of course.
Yeah.
Great stuff, Kevin. Coming up, the 3 things that can make or break your marriage: sex, money, and kids. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Sex with Rebecca, a show geared towards making your relationships the best that they can be, both in and out of the bedroom. In this segment, we'll continue chatting about important premarital stuff with premarital and marital counselor Kevin Coupland. So, Kevin, let's get into money. We touched on it a little bit with the prenup stuff. Now, you have some great ideas when you do premarital counseling. In fact, when you're doing that for my son, he thought that you had some really good ideas about joint versus separate accounts. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
I think, Rebecca, that every couple is going to have a different dynamic of what's going on. But certainly there should be a level of control and also compromise within money, as well as, sex or parenting or kids or whatever that may be. And I think with when it comes to money, having a plan and setting that plan ahead of time, what your priorities are, is also extremely important, because you may like to buy a cottage, but your husband may want a really nice car. You have to have those kinds of discussions ahead of time, understanding what's important, and then a budget is really just a plan to get those things in place. And it's, I used to think of a budget as a swear word. It was not
dirty word.
It was a dirty word, a dirty word. But then I realized through some training that actually a budget is a plan to help you get the things that are most important to you. But if you don't lay out ahead of time, you don't discuss what is important to you, then it's all going to be a surprise.
And you're going in different directions.
Going in different directions. It's like you're rowing in different directions, and that doesn't help.
Right. So, speaking of budgets, one of the things that I ask my clients to do, so I kind of like your idea of having a little bit of your own money and then the joint money to take care of things. So I always tell clients that each party should have some fun money, whether that's $10 or $1,000 a week. And what that does is they actually end up spending less money on the, the fun stuff, because it's like, okay, I'll save up towards this. So if I want to dye my hair purple, it's perfectly okay because it came out of my money.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And watch out for purple hair. I'm almost there.
Okay.
But the thing is that if we don't have that fun money, then we're getting upset over something
and resentful.
Resentful that why did you spend money on purple hair? Whereas we should be able to do that. So I think they're having a little bit of separate, but also together. So really good stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
How about kids? What does that discussion look like? I think that's another swear word, but people don't talk about, do we have kids? Do we not have kids?
Right.
How many do we want? How far apart are they going to be? Are they going to private school? Are they going to public school? How are we going to pay for all of this? Because this is really expensive. So how do you coach people that are doing premarital counseling with you to bring that subject up ahead of time? Because that's a biggie. It's not something you can send back.
It's a very sensitive subject too, and we certainly don't want to make any assumptions. Because I work with couples that have kids, that don't have kids, and want kids and can't have kids. And so we need to be very sensitive and not make any assumptions that they want to have kids or that they don't want to have kids. And I think when you're sitting down then, first thing is to talk about, what did your family look like? Because that's often going to shape then what you think of as the most ideal.
So if you had 4 kids and I had 1,
Yeah.
I may talk small family and you may want a big family.
Or opposite, you may have grown up as a single kid and you just said, I don't want that to happen in my life because I know what it was like to be a single kid. Therefore, I want a little house on the prairie and I want like 10 kids.
And you're saying 10 kids is too many pieces of the pie that are gone.
I grew up in a home of 7 kids, and I know what that's like. Not me personally, but I'm saying theoretically, and then I don't want that for myself. So understanding the why, how people get to what they want, is just as important as understanding the what.
The what. And I think an important thing is timing, because I have many couples who were building careers and they wanted to build, business, pay off the mortgage, whatever. So they deferred having kids to a little bit later when it became more challenging. And now they're trying IVF, and it's very expensive. It's what, 10 to 15 grand a shot.
And emotionally painful too.
And emotionally painful, and it's taxing on the female's body. So these are things we have to talk about ahead of time, that if we are going to defer kids for like 40s, for instance, it's okay, but what is it going to look like? So I think that's an important one that people don't think about nowadays. They think, okay, we'll do it, we'll eventually get to it. So great stuff.
And I think also, sorry, just to interject, adoption as well. I'm seeing a lot more of those kinds of discussions as couples come in and they're discovering that IVF is not working. Is that a viable option as well?
Which takes a long
increase
time.
Their family?
Yeah, so
it
if you waited till 40, nothing happened, then you do IVF, 3 years gone. Now you apply for adoption, maybe a few more years before you wait. So these are things that people should
really
talk about ahead of
it.
time, because they don't know it.
Yeah.
Sex, is that a dirty word for you, or is that okay? Can we talk about it?
No, let's talk about sex, baby.
Let's talk about sex. Okay, so, we have people who save themselves, and they need to have that basic discussion. And I know you see a lot of those kids, religious kids have saved themselves, and that's fine.
And
more
they have
power
very
to
good
them.
reasons for doing
More
that.
power to them, but somehow they don't think about what it's going to look like. Versus the people who have been around the block a few times. So how do we navigate those sexual differences? So what advice would you have for the first group, like that have saved themselves? Like, how would you advise them to prepare for that?
It's really hard to prepare for something that you don't know a whole lot about.
That's why you have to prepare.
That's why you have to prepare. But in terms of sex, if a couple has made the decision to wait until after they've committed themselves at the ceremony to give themselves, then it's hard to know what to expect. And so if you don't know what to expect, what do you talk about? So I see that is very difficult, and I think that discussion can also take place afterwards as well too. Like as things happen, then you can talk about it more as well too, to find out like, how was that for you? How did that feel? And
but
what
even
would
the
you
how-tos, and that's why like some of the stuff that you and I are going to be doing, we're definitely going to include that. One of the things that I find with that subset is that, I love Dr. Lehman's book, Sheet Music. It's great because it lays it out on the table in a very tasteful manner.
It lays it out on the bed, doesn't it?
On the bed, yes, sheet music. It lays it out on the bed, and it's really well done, because the two things I hear time and time again with that subset is, guys think that, they're visual creatures, that looking at someone's junk is going to be really attractive. So some of them will just kind of walk out naked. Wedding night, here I am. Like, take a look. And they think that if she walked into the bedroom naked, they'd go, wow. So they think the girl is going to go, wow. And she's more like,
pretty unrealistic.
Unrealistic, because they think just show the goods and she's going to jump all over that. But that's not what it plays. That's not how it plays out. The other thing that a lot of people end up doing is they rent porn and they want to learn from porn. And that's tragic, because that's not what real sex is.
Pretty unrealistic.
It's very unrealistic, and there've been some very tragic tragic stories that have come out of that, like really not knowing, doing things that well, I won't go into the details. And then when it comes to those who've been around the block a few times, there's stuff there as well. What if we have different desires? What if we like different things, different frequency? How do we navigate that? So do you have a real quick tip for that group?
So I think in that situation, you might already understand yourself and your proclivity, your desires a little bit more, because you have the experience. So then you'll be able to talk about it at least a little bit more, more informed. But I think there's also the other side. You could be possibly a little bit more jaded about sex, as opposed to a couple that haven't before, that are a little bit more idealistic about it. Oh yeah, we're going to have sex, twice a day for the next 20 years. Well, that's not realistic. And
It's not?
I don't think it's realistic. And I don't think it's realistic, to be so negative about it
Right.
either. So finding somewhere a nice common middle ground.
Yeah, and again, it's about talking. So don't show up in a cat suit with a ball gag for your
Yes.
partner and say, hey, how about this?
Yeah.
You have to talk about those things.
Yeah, you really
So
do.
this brings us to something exciting that
Okay.
both of us are excited about.
Yeah.
Now we could go all night long talking about the stuff because we love talking about the stuff.
Yeah.
But since time is of the essence, I want to quickly talk about the premarital workshops that you and I will be offering that'll cover all of this stuff and more and take the onus off people with respect to those difficult conversations that they may not even know they have to have.
Yeah.
So can you just real quick kind of
Yeah.
talk about what we're planning on
So
doing?
why do we do the couples lab? Well, I think mostly it's because you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
And we want to be able to start to help couples ahead of time to be proactive instead of reactive so that they can have really great marriages. And part of that is having the discussions. But like you said, what do we talk about? So a lot of what we're going to be doing in our lab is having those discussions and intentionally giving them the topics as well as shaping the discussion and giving some psychoeducational material that's going to help them out to understand, you know what? It's okay.
Yeah.
It's
and
okay. You got this.
You got this, and you have the questionnaire too, and just giving them a roadmap on how to
Yeah.
make it great.
Right.
So excited about that, and I hope
Yeah.
that we can kind of get people back on
Yes.
track, and instead
Hopefully
of
so.
spending 30 grand on the marriage,
Or-
that maybe lower it a little bit, and
Or 50 grand on a lawyer to.
or a lawyer,
we don't
to
want that
actually
either.
try to have a plan that will
Yeah.
help you get where you want to get.
Because the old, I'm full of sayings, fail to plan to fail.
You are full of sayings.
full of
It's
sayings.
good stuff.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
those are the things you
Yes.
remember. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for all your remarkable insights that you've given us today, and viewers for joining us. Be sure to join us again, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on missed episodes, to watch your favorite shows again, and to access great tips for keeping it hot and intimate. I'm Rebecca Rosenblatt, your host, wishing you happy, healthy, and passionate relationships. Until next time.